Good evening. This is Wendy Hernandez with Command the Courtroom, and I want to welcome you to the monthly, or not the monthly, the weekly Monday night show. And
This
I'm
is the kind of
excited.
day.
This is the kind of day I had, totally. So I have an awesome guest, as you can see, Jane Cebrynski, and I'm going to fully introduce her in a minute. But first, Jane, I want to tell you, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. And before we start getting too deep in conversations, I usually give a disclaimer about the show, and then we can really dive into the good stuff. And I'll give you a little better of a intro. But as you guys know, I am an attorney from Arizona, and I'm only licensed in Arizona. I can only give advice in the state of Arizona. This show is for educational purposes only. You have to research the laws in your jurisdiction, the laws and the statutes and the judges in your jurisdiction. You cannot rely on the things that I am saying on the show. And the fact that you are listening to the show or watching the show does not establish an attorney-client relationship. We do not have a privileged relationship. And I want to remind you guys that if you are on this chat, you mind your manners, because you don't know, your ex could also be on this chat. And if you're making bad comments about your ex on the chat, it could end up as an exhibit in court. So, okay, so let's get back to Jane. And I want to introduce Jane to you guys. I met Jane probably a month and a half or 2 months ago, and we haven't met in person, but she's really a dynamic person. She's a sports life coach. And just in our couple of conversations that I had on the phone with Jane, I thought she'd be a wonderful guest because she's been through a lot in her life. She helps people who are going through transitions in their life. And I know that a lot of you who are watching the show are going through either divorces or child custody transitions and just changes, in the way that your family structure looks like. So Jane has a lot of value to add in this area. So again, Jane, thank you for being here. And I want to start off the conversation by saying, yes, we are in the holidays now. Halloween just finished in the year of 2020. And, I feel like it's the holidays. And I can tell you that I have a lot of difficult cases, and a lot of my listeners they have difficult cases. But on top of those things, Jane, we are all experiencing this pandemic, which I think has made life difficult. And then this is an election year, and I can tell you that I feel the stress from the election. When I'm watching TV, all the ads are on, and and I feel certain things, maybe angry, a lot of angst, and I think we're all feeling it. So the topic tonight is, how can we have an intentional, fulfilled holiday season? And is it possible with all of this stuff swirling in our world, Jane?
Well, that's when it becomes even more important, right? Because there are so many things outside of our control. And by being really intentional with how we choose to spend the holidays is something that we get to control. And it allows us to take our power back in a time when we feel very, very powerless.
Okay. So how can we do that? Because I can tell you, I'm normally pretty calm. I'm pretty peaceful, pretty chilled. I meditate every day. But lately, I was just telling my husband the other day, I feel so angry all the time. And I feel like it's because I feel like there's so much out of my control. So when there's so much like this COVID and the election, things that we can't control, how do you take your power back? How would you recommend somebody start doing that?
Well, so, one of the things that I do is I coach individuals in the fundamentals of time, energy, and emotional management. And all three of those things go hand in hand together. And so the first thing that I recommend is giving yourself an opportunity. First of all, we've got to give ourselves a lot of grace and compassion right now, because we're still going through such a tumultuous, unprecedented time. And people are still trying to find their way through that. And there's a lot that is still very unknown with how certain states are opening up, or certain communities are opening up, or, how we are going to be able to spend time possibly with family, with loved ones or not. And it really starts first just kind of honoring that we're all going through a really crazy time, and that there's a lot of grief around it. And I think that that's one of the things that, when I was first introduced into coaching and I was going through a divorce, when grief was the first thing that was introduced to me, it just first of all gave me an opportunity to give myself some grace and some compassion. So I start by that because, the emotions are going to show up. Anger is an emotion that we've all been given. And, first we've got to just acknowledge it. And then it's like, okay, what are the tools and the strategies that allow us to move forward? And I think one of the first, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. It wasn't anything that important. So the first thing, talk to me about it. Let's.
Well, we've got this phenomenal tool that I found. So I was looking back during my coaching certification, and when it was coming up on the holidays, and I had been divorced, and I'm estranged from one of my children. So I didn't have one of my sons in my life at that time. And one of the first tools that I really anchored in was hurt people hurt people. Mm-hmm. It's just really, really simple. And that's it. People are oftentimes like, okay, what do I do with that? What does that mean? But it's really simple. Hurt people hurt people. So when you're feeling hurt, whether it's because you're going through the divorce or you're frustrated and angry with what's happening in society, we tend to take that out on other people. And the beautiful part of that tool is that when somebody reacts to us in kind of a hurtful way, the first thing we can do is sort of show some compassion and grace in that moment by anchoring in that tool of hurt people hurt people. And what it does is it keeps us from going back and forth, hurting one another like a tennis match.
Okay. Yep. That's right. That's right.
And especially with the holidays, I mean, you don't have to be going through a divorce to have a really emotional holiday season. You get people around a table with different points of view, and you get people, especially right now, because we are in a political season, there's a lot of hurt people hurt people. And again, it's a tiny little tool, but it's pretty powerful. Pretty powerful.
That's an awesome tool. I've never heard that before.
I know. And most people is kind of like, okay, it's too simple, but it is incredibly powerful. And so really that's just getting the practice around using that tool and saying it to yourself, like, okay, hurt people, ouch, that kind of hurt. And then just giving some grace and some time to kind of relax and calm down before responding or reacting.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you for that. I want to ask you, because I think that a lot of people who watch this show are in situations where they may be estranged from their children, or maybe feeling alienated, or like the other parents alienating them. And I wonder, since this is something that you've experienced, if you can offer anything specific to these people who might be going through it to help them manage it, or I don't know, just give them some peace, help them feel some peace.
Well, it's certainly a very, very difficult thing to go through as somebody who, is living it firsthand. And it's where I really have to work very hard to stay emotionally centered. But I think one of the most valuable things that I've learned is that, number one, he cannot be out of relationship with me. I get to choose that. So we might not be together and we might not be talking to one another, but I'm still in relationship with him. So whether it's a spiritual relationship, a faithful relationship, I'm still thinking about him every single day. I'm still honoring him because he's young. And what he might need right now is the space and the time to heal, because he's also gone through his own experience in the divorce. And I can sit here today and have this conversation with you with maybe less tears. It doesn't mean that it doesn't affect me every single day, but that's truly an attribute to the coaching and the work that I've done. And I anchor in hurt people every day because he's hurting. And one of the ways that he's dealing with that is to hurt me, and so I show him a lot of compassion and a lot of forgiveness and a lot of understanding as well.
Thank you for that. How do you get to this place? So, I know at least one person who's watching today right now, and is having difficulty in the relationship with one of their children. And, I think that like a person can recognize that their child who might be less mature is hurting. And this person can say, yes, I'm going to extend compassion to them. Yet the person who's doing that is in a great deal of pain and might be struggling to make it through, or may be struggling to get from today to tomorrow, and just wonder if they'll be able to do it. Like, do you have any thoughts on for the person who is just in such pain that they just don't know if they can go on?
Do you mean the person like who's in my shoes where,
Yes.
yeah. So, well, I have to work on it every single day because that parent-child relationship is everything. And it means everything to me. And I have to really respect that he's on a journey as well. Now, that doesn't mean that I stay in relationship with him. And it doesn't mean that I'm not reaching out or sending him cards, letting him know that I'm thinking about him all the time. But, even his brothers have said, Mom, be patient, give him time. And he knows that I know what he's doing. I know where he is. I know what's going on in his life. I stay connected to him in ways that he's not necessarily even aware of. And I really have to anchor in, having faith and hope. And that's one of the, fundamentals of our coaching is just giving hope and figuring out what that means for you. And, anchoring in faith, however you define that. But I have faith that one day. And in the meantime, I want to support him in his journey. And I think the hardest lesson I had to learn through it is that it's not about me. It's not about me. I have to respect that he's saying, not now, Mom. Like, I'm not ready now. And I have to just really go, wow, that's not about me. Because the me wants to hug him, love him, kiss him, talk to him, tell him I'm sorry, ask for forgiveness, have conversations, explain, do whatever he needs. But what he's saying is, I need space. And so I really had to change my thinking to not make it about me, but to make it about him.
Wow. That's beautiful. That's amazing.
Taken time to get there. And I'm thankful for my coach. I mean, that is one of the reasons why I coach. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping people going through a transition like this, because it was my coach that really helped me get the tools and the skills to be able to sit here today and have this conversation.
And how long was that process for you? Is it ongoing?
Of course, it's ongoing, right? I mean, life is always changing. And if it's not this, it could be something else. And there's so many things, out of our control anyway. I mean, who would have expected COVID to hit the way it did and affect us in so many different ways? And so it's an ongoing process as we continue to change and evolve.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. So can you talk a little bit about, what role forgiveness might have in a person having a more happy and fulfilled life, just in general, but, specifically as we get into the holidays and, a lot of times there is drama that happens. I tell you that in my law practice, almost every Thanksgiving, I say, hey, we're going to shut down the shop early. And almost every Thanksgiving, I'm there late because there is something happening.
Yeah.
So how do we get there? Forgiveness is a hard thing for me, and I think for a lot of people. But I also heard that, it's really, it's big if you can achieve that.
Sure. I think, there's a saying that to not forgive is like taking the poison yourself, but wanting the other person to die.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like inflicting the pain on yourself when you choose not to forgive. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's really about, can you change the thinking and really anchor in gratitude and
Mm.
focus on things that you can be grateful for? Because even when we are hurting and even when we are going through a difficult time, there's always opportunities to find gratitude and joy. And by choosing not to forgive somebody, you really produce those chemicals in your body that are not healthy for you. And so, again, if we could just recognize that the only person we're really hurting is ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really whether you were the person who was injured in the divorce or you did the injury, depending on, how you look at it. This is really an opportunity to take back your power and really be in control of how you want to show up and how you want to live your life, regardless of the circumstances.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So I think that, and I'm not trying to poke holes in what you're saying, but what I am trying to do is address the questions that I think a lot of people who are listening to this might have.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I know a lot of these listeners, and I know that a lot of them, for example, are going through abusive relationships or have been in abusive relationships where they have been the victims of, it could be significant physical abuse or mental abuse, financial abuse. And so, when somebody finds themselves or themselves in the position of having been a victim or continuing to be a victim, how do they move from that position to one of being more in control of their lives or being more empowered? What tips or tools or suggestions do you have for that person who's listening?
Well, first, I want to certainly honor and respect those people who have gone through that, that kind of a situation, and they might need to get professional counseling and therapy around that. So I want to first, have my own disclaimer. I am not a counselor. I am not accredited to deal with, any kind of abuse in that way. As a life coach, the one fundamental difference is it's about moving forward. And so how do you want to move forward? And that becomes the first question, really. And it's an opportunity, and you've got to do it in small bite-sized pieces. So I'm not suggesting that somebody can take big, huge steps, but we want to take little baby steps. Sometimes one small change can lead to much bigger change over time. And so, I would consider, like, what's one small thing that you can do to care for yourself, to love yourself if you've been in that kind of a situation. And maybe you set, a boundary that says, okay, I'm only going to deal with this person. Or, for example, in my situation, I didn't respond to any emails that were going to continue to inflict any kind of injury on me. And I made it a rule, again, to make myself the priority and not that person, because there was a reason we're no longer together. And so I want to continue to empower myself, but you just starting with one small act of self-love.
Mm. Can you give some other examples of small acts of self-love for people who are struggling to come up with them?
Listen, I'm somebody who didn't really even understand what self-love meant. And I think that's something that, I still can really look at and try to continue to discover for myself. But, self-love can literally be exercising, anything that helps your well-being, anything that makes you feel good. And that's the most important thing to ask yourself is, like, what do I need right now to feel good? And it might be a hot bubble bath. It might be a call to a friend. It might be a walk around the park. It might be a hug. But that's, and it could be a good night's sleep. And, how can you give that to yourself? Knowing that the more that we do love ourselves and take care of ourselves, it really gives us the opportunity to show up for the other people that we love and support in our life.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So let's talk for a minute about intentionality. When we talked about the topic, and we talked about how we thought addressing the upcoming holidays to make them more happy and fulfilled, and I think is actually these were your
Mhm.
suggestions, and also
Yeah.
intentional. Like, how does being intentional? What does that mean, first of all, and how does it play into being more happy and fulfilled in general, but just with the upcoming holidays and maybe being embroiled in a divorce or a custody conflict?
So it starts with having a plan and asking yourself, okay, what do I want this holiday season to look like? So keeping in mind that, you know, depending on the situation, you're in a rough season as well. You're in a difficult season and a challenging season. So, I coach in the language and context of sports. So I'll use the analogy of sports. We know we're not going to the Super Bowl. We know it's a losing season, but it doesn't mean that we can't show up every day to try to play the best game ever. And so what I did when I was in the first season of the holidays after my divorce is I got really intentional with, okay, what do I want this to look like? And I actually wrote it down. So first it was like, who do I want to be? I want to be happy. I want to be peaceful. I want to be loving. I want to serve other people. I kind of just defined for me, how did I want to show up? Because again, it's about everyone else will come at you the same way. And I coach in change. And so, how do I want to change and how do I want to be different? And so, for example, for December, I remember very clearly saying, okay, it's going to be a December to remember. And I literally made a list of everything I thought I might want to do, whether I was alone or with my kids. From going, I looked at Christmas lights. I did a tour in my car of Christmas lights on my own because that's something I wanted to do. And I went and saw a play. I invited my niece to go with me. So, it was one of my nieces, not one of my children's, but it was somebody who was important to me. And I just was very intentional. And I think the way you get intentional is you take what's out of your head and you put it on paper.
I agree.
And it's almost like having like, okay, what are some goals? And so you may decide that no matter what, you're going to be really peaceful. That's what your goal is. And then you ask yourself the question, okay, what are the things that I need to do in order to be peaceful? So maybe you can't engage with somebody who triggers you and gets you, in an unpeaceful state. Maybe you learn to meditate. Now would be a beautiful time for people to learn how to meditate or maybe take yoga. Or, again, it's back to that hot bubble bath. I'm sounding like this is all very female oriented. For men too, meditation is a beautiful thing. Yoga, a hot bath, a hot shower. I mean, certainly asking yourself that question, like, what do I need? And that's where the self-love and the self-care comes into play, because it's not about how do I make sure I'm peaceful for everybody else? How do I make sure I'm peaceful for myself?
Yep.
I love
So,
fishing.
yeah, that's a
Fishing
great
is
suggestion.
peaceful. Yeah.
That's very peaceful. So,
Super peaceful.
so yes, people should be asking, what do you need to do to have a peaceful state of mind? And, one thing that I teach in my course, which is not a self-development course, I have a few courses, but one of them is the 21-day child custody challenge. And we go through an exercise on one of the days, and I ask people to imagine what their life would look like, their future would look like with their children. What, do they want to live into? What are the dreams of their future? And I ask them to write it out in detail, even if, things feel kind of outlandish or out of the question, just to write it all down. Because I also, like you, Jane, I think it's an important, exercise. And I hear you saying that for the holidays, for people to kind of make their list, their wish list, their bucket list. And it doesn't mean that they necessarily have to do everything.
Well, I mean, I think that's what started it for me is just by starting to write it down, and I'm also a yoga instructor too. So I believe in that, and visualization is so important. And listen, my son that I'm estranged from, he's older. I still do that practice too. I mean, I still write down, my intentions for being able to spend time with him. And one day, his family and grandchildren and all of those things, and take trips with them. I mean, I plan trips and I write that down, and I'm very intentional about that. And that's where the hope and the faith and the love comes into place.
How do we have faith or hope when we feel so beaten down? When somebody feels like nothing ever goes their way, or, for example, they're in the middle of a custody battle, they're running out of money, they got a bad decision, they have a terrible judge, they don't even like their attorney. Like, how do you find faith when you have, things that tell you, maybe you should give it up?
Well, everybody has their own definition of faith. And so, when we go anywhere, when you go out to a restaurant, you have faith that the person who's cooking your meal is washing their hands nowadays, covering and wearing a mask. So we wake up with faith every single day. I mean, you have faith that when you turn on the hot water, it's going to be there. And you have faith that, if your kids are supposed to get on a bus, the bus driver is going to show up on time. And so we kind of, we have and live in faith every single day. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that. And that's when, having hope oftentimes is being able to have a relationship or identify with a group of people, a community of people like you have here, that can show you it's possible. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, I've been there. I've had my dark, dark days when I didn't think things would happen, and people would say there's light, and I'm like, I don't see it. I'm not sure I believe you. And one of my friends gave me some great advice, which was be where your feet are. Just take it one step at a time. And that gave me hope, and hopefully watching me and being a part of this community. I mean, I think that's why what you do is so incredibly powerful and beautiful, because this is a support group right here. And totally. This is how you get hope, is to be able to see other people who've gotten through it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, it's so true. And while you're saying that, I want to share Laura Lisby, who's on here. She says this is her first live that she's made it to. She's been watching for the past few months and has found so much value. She just got an order in her favor and have to give the channel credit. So yay for you, Laura Lisby, whoever you are, and wherever you are. And so for you guys out there who are going through what you're going through and maybe feel like you're losing faith, know that it is possible. Laura Lisby, she made it happen. You can make it happen. And things aren't always going to go perfectly.
No.
I can tell you that I've had kind of a rough week with different things going on, with cases and practice, and my daughter's doing online school, and there's challenges with that. And
oh, yes,
it's hard. Like, it is hard, but
well, and that's, I have so much empathy and compassion for parents out there whose kids are home, and that just added another layer, right? That just added one more layer. And I think that's when you've got to give everybody some forgiveness. This is going to be a year to remember, and one we want to forget. But if we can just get through it, I think the kids are going to get a medal, parents are going to get a medal. I mean, it is a really, really challenging time. And I think that's all the more reason why working on emotional management, finding those tools, anchoring in hurt people, just again, as a way to give yourself a breath, to give yourself a break, and really find the joy. Because even in the most difficult and challenging times, there is joy. There is joy. And it might be small and it might be fleeting, but it's there. I promise it's there.
I love it. It's wonderful. It's so true, and I don't know if we talked about, Jane, my cards. Did we talk about the Power and the Truth card deck that I have?
No, sounds
Oh,
like something I really dig.
yeah, totally. It's an affirmation deck of cards,
Mm.
and that I created a couple years ago, and I actually just finished a companion journal that I'm hoping to release by the end of the year.
Ah,
And I'll have to send you a deck of the cards, but I think one of the cards is basically it's about finding joy in the everyday, and also like creating joy for somebody.
yes. So we coach a lot so I coach in three dimensions. I coach people professionally, personally, and philanthropically. Because number one, we know when you can serve another and give hope to someone else, you're actually helping yourself. Again, that's another way that you are loving yourself when you're intentionally helping and serving others. And you can do that in the smallest ways, whether it's baking cookies for a neighbor, or bringing in the garbage can for a neighbor. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a really big thing, but that little act not only helps the other person, but you get a shot of dopamine, you get some endorphins going in your body, and those are all positive chemicals that get to overcome cortisol, which is that stress and anxiety chemical that gets produced in the body.
That is so true. It's so true, and sometimes somebody just giving me a compliment. Like, my brother came over the other day. I haven't seen him since March because, we've been pretty
Because of
strict in terms,
COVID.
yeah, the quarantining.
Mm.
And he told me, which he said, "Sis, you look like you've lost weight." And I
Oh,
was
in
like,
COVID, that's a good compliment.
that made me feel good. I don't know. I mean,
Yes.
but just any kind of compliment. I mean, I think, sometimes somebody compliments you on your shoes or your smile or your eyes or whatever. And it always makes me feel good. And like you were talking about, Jane, I mean, the chemicals, I mean, there's a actual physical thing that
Change.
happens, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, gratitude plays a big role in producing those chemicals as well. And so, really being able to find, maybe you didn't get a result that you wanted to, but maybe the gratitude is in the fact that, listen, I have my child to be fighting over, you know, I
Mhm.
mean, there's that. And there's maybe, just a friend that maybe supported you, or somebody that you want to reach out to and just, share some love with, or give a hug to. I mean, those are ways that we can serve ourselves in really difficult times, but we also then are serving someone else. And that can be so powerful.
So, how does somebody pull themselves out? Because I know there are people out there who are so depressed, and sad and feeling isolated. And where, how can they pull themselves out? I mean, sometimes, I've been there so deep in depression, like I just feel like I can't. I'm in this whirlpool. I'm getting sucked in and I can't get out. Do you have any tools or thoughts or processes that you can share with somebody or share with the community here?
Well, again, I'm not an expert in dealing with depression. And certainly I want to encourage anybody who feels like they need to extend to professional help, they go there. I do know, however, some little simple strategies like breathing. As a yoga instructor, we're constantly teaching breathing. And if people can practice taking deep, slow inhales and slow exhales, you really can, again, change those chemicals. And there's studies out there that show that the breath really does help with depression and anxiety. Again, I'm not promoting that as the cure, but it is something that we have that is free, and something that we can rely on all throughout the day whenever we need to. And the recommendation is that you just simply take a nice, deep, slow inhale and a really slow exhale. And that can start the process, right? And then
Mhm.
you've got to think about what are the things that bring you joy and can make you happy. And getting out in nature, that might be a challenge for some people, I understand. But if you've got a park nearby, or just going out maybe onto a lawn, if you have that, looking at a tree, going, being out in nature, does tremendous for our mindset and bringing us out of some of those darker moments.
Okay, excellent. I think those are all wonderful suggestions. Okay, so some people are going to be forced, and I don't know how many get-togethers there's going to be this year. I mean, I think some people may be getting together. A lot of times people are forced into get-togethers with maybe people they don't get along with, or they're forced into interactions, with their ex because of the children. Um, any coping mechanisms for being in difficult situations with people that necessarily you don't choose to have in your life? They're just part of your life because they are, and they have to be.
Yeah, they have to be. And again, it's how do you want to be? Expect them to show up the way they normally do, and have sort of your game plan. What is the game plan going to be? Because their behavior is probably pretty predictable if you've been with them over time and this is a repeat offender, if you will. And so have the game plan in place that says, okay, these are the things that I'm going to do. I'm going to anchor in. I mean, because I had to do this for myself. So I had a game plan in advance. Like, well, what if this happens or that happens? What am I going to do? And I literally was like, okay, I'm going to anchor in hurt people, hurt people, hurt people, hurt people. I'm going to say it to myself over and over again. So I'm not going to take whatever's being said personally. I'm going to acknowledge that everybody's experiencing hurt. Grandparents are experiencing hurt. Siblings are everybody's experiencing hurt. Even the person that, your ex that you're not enjoying their company. I mean, a lot of it is because they're hurt. And you have to then also look at yourself. Am I also responding in the same way because I'm feeling hurt? And so just honoring your feelings and acknowledging that, and then kind of anchoring in that tool. I mean, that to me is really, really, really powerful. And then just choosing to offer some compassion and grace. Again, it's not for them. It's for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right.
It's for you.
So this is a practice, right?
This is a practice.
My daughter gets so frustrated. She's learning how to play the piano, and she gets so frustrated because she says, this is hard and I'm not good at it and I don't want to do it, and I could see, yeah.
I'm learning how to play the piano too. I started over COVID, and I say, this is hard. And then I'm reminded that if we want to get good at anything, we have to practice. So just as in sports. And so what I would encourage, with your daughter is have her think about something that she does believe she does well. It could be math. It could be reading. I mean, none of those things come without practice. None of those things come without practice. And so when I've gotten frustrated with piano, I've had to just remind myself, nothing comes easy without practice. I mean, we have to practice. And all of these tools, it's the same thing. And I asked myself the question, athletes spend 90% of their time in practice and 10%, let's say, in game day, where they get that excited feeling, the butterflies, they get that opportunity to win. Well, we spend most of our life, every day is game day. And so how do we set ourselves up to win that day? And so it may literally be, okay, my intention for today is to just really work on not getting angry. My intention for today might just be, okay, I'm going to practice that piano for 15 minutes, no matter how good I do or how bad I do. But just starting with something small so that we can celebrate a win. Because the more we practice and the more we get to celebrate the little wins, that motivates us to go for the bigger wins. So whether it's an emotional thing, and listen, getting triggered, and it happens to me often, right? NBA players usually shoot at least 1,000 shots a day. I mean, Michael Jordan will tell you he missed, 1,500 a day in order to be great. I mean, we just have to practice. But When you get triggered by something, especially around the holidays too, it's just a note like, oh, this is an opportunity to practice. I'm going to practice breathing because that reduces anger. It reduces, a lot of emotions. So just breathing and pausing and asking yourself the question, like, what are some winning strategies for me? If getting up and taking a time out when you're feeling angered or you're feeling frustrated, if that's a winning strategy, then that's what you want to do. Mm-hmm. Maybe staying for only 15 minutes instead of 2 hours is really what you need and how you want to honor yourself. And it's really comes back to that self-care.
Absolutely. There was a planner that I used to do a few years ago. I think the woman who does the planner, the yearly planner, still does it. And I think now it's called the Life Goals Planner. Her name is Leonie Dawson. Have you ever heard of her, Jane?
No, but I'm familiar with a lot of different planners out there.
So this is like a really kind of fun, colorful, cartoony planner, and that's kind of what drew me to it, because I think my life is so linear and type A that it was just kind of fun to have this planner that, had cute little cartoony drawings. But one of the things in one of her planners was an emergency RX, or emergency prescription that you wrote for yourself in times of emergency. Yes. And so she gave an example of the different things on her list. And I remember, of course, there was like taking a bath. One was like getting some essential oil that she loved and putting it on her wrists, or going outside, taking a walk, so I think that's what I hear you saying too, is coming up with these life preservers, really. Go ahead.
If you think about it, every athlete goes into their game with a game plan. They don't necessarily know what the opponents are going to do, so they have to adjust, but they have a plan. It's no different than, we have an escape plan in the event of a fire, right? We don't wait for the fire to happen to have the plan. We sort of map it out and figure it out in advance. And I think what's great about that is you can write out a plan, and then you can actually practice it, and you can study it, and you can review it. And that way you improve the odds and the chances that you'll reflect on it, or it'll come to you in that time. And so, having a game plan, I think, is really powerful and really helpful.
Awesome. So that's definitely something that you would recommend for people as they go into the holidays with potentially explosive situations with family members or ex-family members or exes or soon-to-be exes.
Yep. And know what works for you, because, again, what's a winning strategy for you may be very different for somebody else. But you again, most people are going to show up relatively predictable because they're not changing. It's you if you're choosing to change, and that's, people hire me to change. And so they have to expect that everybody else is going to show up the same old party, but how you want to practice showing up may be different.
So do you think that would you recommend kind of proceeding with the philosophy that whoever the person is in my life that I don't like, or I don't like the way that they act, that they're never going to change? Would that be a good way to just kind of live your life, do you think?
The truth is we do have the ability to change, but you have to want to change, right?
Yeah.
So you have to want to change. And so if they have no desire to change, you can simply, honor them for who they are. And again, this is designed to keep you from getting frustrated, to keep you from getting angry or upset or triggered. Just simply going, yep, that's who they are. That's who they are. And then you get to decide, is that somebody I want to be around? Is that somebody I want to hang out with? What are my strategies for working with that person? So that, I think it's really powerful when you already know how somebody's going to show up, then there's fewer surprises. And, this might sound really crazy, but there were certain things in my situation that were very predictable. And so I would play a game. I would play like a guessing game of how things were going to play out. And then I would laugh because it would be pretty predictable. And so I found humor in it because I knew that's what was going to happen.
Yep.
And
I got it.
laughter is good medicine. So if I could laugh about it again, I was helping myself. I wasn't allowing myself to get engaged in the counterproductive behaviors that were just going to hurt me.
Yep. I got it. So, what I'm feeling or what I'm hearing is, you talking about instead of allowing this person to make you feel X or to put you in the situation, you taking control of, okay, this is how I'm going to react. This is how I'm going to feel. This is what I'm going to let upset me or not upset me. Is that right?
Well, yeah. And that, I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of practice. I don't want to try to minimize this and make it sound like, oh, this is just like a walk in the park. It's not. And listen, I get triggered and I get pulled back in sometimes. And then I go, okay, this is an opportunity for me to practice. So I see the gift in it, which again, that's through a lot of training and a lot of practice. That's not necessarily for people to be able to see the gifts right when they're in the turmoil. But
Yeah.
If I get a chance to practice it, it just helps me to be a stronger person. And it helps me to be more of the kind of person, the kind of woman, the kind of mother, the kind of ex-spouse I want to be. So, I defined that for myself. I decided, how do I want to be as an ex-person? How do I want to show up as a mom? And they don't get to decide that for me.
Right.
They really don't get to decide that. So if I decide I want to be kind and show gratitude and, be helpful, then that's who I'm going to be. And if they choose not to, that's on them.
That's okay. Really good. So that kind of goes hand in hand with, deciding what you want to create, not just in life, but during the holidays, but also
Yeah.
deciding who you want to be, who you want to show up as.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And so the process for making those decisions or outlining that would be what? What are your thoughts on that?
I just started to write it down.
Yeah.
My coach had me do the work around it. And again, that wasn't something that, I just have an idea of what that looks like, right? I had never experienced this before. I had not been through a divorce before. I didn't know what it was going to be like necessarily. So I had to kind of visualize, like you talked about, imagine what I wanted for myself and, the kind of person I wanted to be. And then I continued to expand on it.
Yeah.
So I continued to add to it and expand on it. And it continues to evolve and change. So, who you are today isn't necessarily going to be who you are a year from now. Most definitely.
That's right. Okay. Yes, I agree.
Yes.
We're all works in progress.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of Madonna. Because I was growing up in the 80s when she was popular,
Oh
but
yeah, me too.
I feel like, she has constantly reinvented herself. And, I think, you may or may not like her, but she's a great example of how you can change and become a new person and evolve if that's what you want to be.
Absolutely. I mean, they've got that saying that you're not really discovering yourself, you're inventing and creating yourself. And you get to decide who that is, who you want to be. And that is super cool.
Yeah.
And it'll take work because, if you were somebody who was quick to anger and that's something that you're trying to let go of, that's where the muscle memory lies. I mean, that's who you've been. And if you want to change that, you've got to get into that gym and you've got to do the curls around that, so to speak. And you've got to push through some difficult times until you get some new muscle memory around being that more calm individual, if that's what you're seeking to be. So,
Yeah.
Again, it's just creating new muscles.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on, because I think sometimes people are so used to being a certain way, because I found myself doing this, that you don't even realize when you're doing these habits or these behaviors that you want to change so how does somebody become more aware of that?
Well, self-awareness, of course, is such a critical component, and just the fact that you're asking that question says you're already starting the process of being self-aware. And, it's sometimes it's brought to our attention by other people, but I think a lot of times it's looking at your life and going, okay, are the choices that I am making me feel good? Are they helping me to live the life I want to live? Am I, getting reactions from people that are negative? And is that an opportunity for me to reflect on myself and take a moment? And there's some amazing books out there on self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And more people are becoming, more familiar with that, and really and again, journaling I found was really, really, really helpful, because then I could go back and read it. And that would always enlighten me a little bit more. And it would just really draw more self-awareness. And the other beautiful thing about journaling was it really, gives me an opportunity to see how far I've come, to see where I have grown, and see where the opportunities are for me to continue to grow.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting to go back and read my old journals.
Journaling,
I still have a lot of them from 15 years ago.
I know writing is just so powerful, and it can be very therapeutic. I was in counseling prior to my divorce, and one of the things they suggested is write a letter. You don't have to send it. You don't have to do anything with it. It's better than, sending an email and accidentally hitting send. You can write it, and you just get to purge a lot of emotions. I mean, I think that's why some people love boxing. You hit the punching bag, you get to let out some of those emotions and some of those feelings. And the endorphins are good for us, and exercise is good for us. So it serves many purposes. But really, by writing, I think you have an opportunity to kind of purge some of those feelings and emotions too.
This is such wonderful advice for people coming up on the holidays. So any, last tips for people as they head into this season? And like, I really want everybody to, no matter what you're going through, like, you can make it joyous and you can make it happy.
Yeah.
I believe that. And you have this community here, like Jane said, and I want Jane to share before she goes, how you can find her. But any last tips or thoughts on people making this the best season they can in spite of the difficulty?
Well, I would say wake up every morning and make a list of a few things that you can be grateful for. If you get up in the morning, that's the first thing you can be grateful for. And especially with what's happening today in our world, if you are not suffering from COVID, that's something to be grateful for. And then find the little things. I mean, sometimes it can be something that's just right underneath your nose. It can be, gratitude for a warm pair of socks. It can be gratitude for a butterfly that, goes by. We can find things to be grateful for if we allow ourselves to be open and to look for them. That child that you're homeschooling that might be driving you a little bit crazy, when they give you a hug, that's something to be super grateful for. Totally. And, when they jump on the bed, maybe you're a little annoyed, but at the same time, those are fleeting moments because they do grow up, and you may miss that later. So capturing that. And then really, I say, especially going through such challenging times that divorce can bring and child custody, one day at a time. How can I win today? How can I win today? And how can I find joy today? Is it in that hot bubble bath? Is it, having my favorite thing for breakfast? Is it sitting with a cup of coffee on the back porch? Is it reading a book? What are those things? Because every time you do that, that's a little bit more self-care and a little bit more self-love that you show yourself.
I love that, and I want to share, you brought that up. And I think like it's been so difficult. It's been difficult being kind of homebound for a lot of us. And, I can tell I told my husband that my best purchase of this pandemic was one of those little Nespresso machines.
Love Nespresso.
It wasn't like, it's not that big fancy one, but I bought the little Nespresso machine, and it's amazing. And the highlight of my morning, every morning, of course, besides waking up alive, is making a beautiful Nespresso with my almond milk and picking out one of my cool coffee cups. And that brings me so much happiness. And before, it's not anything I ever would have paid attention to. So I just want to share that with you guys. I'd love to hear what you guys' small wins are.
Well, that's the thing that, that's where I talk about the gifts, because we can find little things that we're more appreciative. So here's a really silly thing that'll shed a lot of light on me to your audience. But one of my favorite things during confinement, I have a hula hoop.
Really?
Yes. And I love to hoop. That's a $4 purchase, by the way. I think it's like $4. And number one, exercise. Number two, it makes me go back to my childhood. And that brings me, a lot of joy. And my kids, my nieces who are in their 20s think it's hilarious. But by the way, I'm better than they are. And they try to use it. And I'll put that on with some music. And that just brings me like, tremendous joy.
It's really cool.
Well, it might not be for everybody, but that's just something, that I do. So, I encourage people, like, go back into your childhood. I mean, I've got coloring books out, and I've got, all kinds of fun things that just from my childhood that was joyful. And so when you're in confinement, that might be the thing.
Yeah. I love that. My daughter just came in the room in my office here this morning, and she had her little hula hoop. So I may have to try that, Jane.
Try it, please do.
I will. Last time I tried it, I couldn't keep it up over my hips like I used to do it when I was a kid.
I know.
And it's like, what happened? I don't know what happened.
Great. Practice, Wendy. You can get that muscle memory back.
There you go. So that's what Jane is talking about. You guys, you got to practice this self-awareness and not reacting and living into who you want to be and creating the life that you want.
Mm-hmm. It all takes practice. That's what I discovered. And I fought for a long time. And when I just realized, like, if you want to get good at anything, whether it's controlling your emotions or playing the piano or hula hooping, you got to practice.
Yep. Awesome. I love it. So Jane, can you tell me how you can help people and how they can find you?
Sure. You can find me online at, so I have LinkedIn, and my first and last name's up here, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn, but you can also email me if you have any questions, jane@pattersonsportsventures.com. And we also have Life Training Academy. So you can find me on jane@lifetrainingacademy.com.
Awesome. Well, you guys, so Jane is a wonderful resource, and she's been through what a lot of you are going through. And you can see she's really an amazing person. It just kind of takes life as it comes and handles it. And this is taking practice. So I'm sure she can help you. Reach out to her. And I will see you guys next week. Remember to keep on trucking even through the holidays. And Jane, thank you so much. I loved having you. And I think that's it, you guys. I'll call it a night. Hi to everybody out there, and talk soon. Love you. Bye.
Wendy, thank you too. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. All right, guys. Signing off. Bye.